Hello everyone, I'm Silent Death and welcome back to my Let's Play Space Engineers series. There has been a patch. It's added spherical gravity generators, which I guess would be okay for collecting trash or something like that. And maybe a few other specific functions. But I don't have any use for them planned immediately. They've also added mod support for prefabricated chips or exporting prefabricated chips. The upside compared to SE Toolbox's export function is that you can export things that are linked by routers, which I do not believe you can do in SE Toolbox currently. The downside is that you need to be in creative mode to export them, as you have to copy and paste and then go to the screen and export the clipboard to a file. I have been working on my super weapon a little bit more. Unfortunately, it's still not, or it's been rather difficult to make an improvement that works reliably. So we're not going to be working on that this episode. Perhaps next episode. I still have a few ideas to try when I'm upgrading that. In addition to the new modding support, they've added a few new respawn ships. This is the escape pod, or their version of an escape pod, though it's really more of a lifeboat than an escape pod. There are some over here, which I've imported using SE Toolbox. So there is a mining one right here, a assembler one right here, and a refinery one right here. In addition to the normal ship right there, the normal respawn ship. I'm not quite sure if you have to edit the files to change those or if it just randomly picks one when you respawn. I have not tested that. I also haven't tested the export function extensively to find out if there are any other differences between SE Toolbox and the game's version of exporting. However, today what we're going to do is work on something I've mentioned previously that I want to work on, and that is creating a custom scenario. As the developers have been focusing a lot on modding support, I imagine they will eventually add support for custom scenarios. And as I have also mentioned earlier, I wanted to create a custom scenario based around an escape pod. The idea is that you will be launching, or as soon as you log in, you'll be flung out of a ship in an escape pod, and that ship will then explode, either suffer some kind of catastrophic internal disaster and cause the ship to completely destroy itself, or by being under attack by other ships. I would prefer it to be by being under attack, but that depends on if I can make ships spawn and then despawn at the beginning of the game. I haven't looked at the spawn, whatever it is, spawn ships or spawn entities thing to see if that's possible yet or not, but that is one option. Another option would be kind of like to have it fly into a minefield or something, and that would be a way to destroy the ship. I do want the main ship to be completely destroyed so that the player is left with just the escape pod, and they'll have to scavenge cargo ships to be able to survive and eventually get a refinery and assembler and all that. There won't be enough materials in the escape pod itself to build a refinery and an assembler, either of those. That is one of the limits that are going to be on the escape pod. It's going to be a bit fancier than the very basic escape pod we had here, but not quite as fancy as this one. It will probably have room for more than one person. At least that is the initial plan. It'll be sort of a military grade, long-term escape pod. I also intend to use a gravity thruster to shoot it out, so that'll limit the player's options. It'll only have retro thrusters to slow it down, so only thrusters in one direction, and maybe a gyroscope. So it will be very limited maneuverability. It'll also have very limited power, probably relying solely on battery power. After a few attempts to work on this off camera, I've come to the conclusion that to really get started, I need to build at least a rough draft of the ship the escape pod is going to be launching from. That way I know kind of how I want to sequence the explosions and what kind of force that needs to be attacking it and how many escape pods are going to be and a few other things like that. Thus, that is what we're going to work on today, is just building a very basic rough draft of the ship that we're going to be launching from. It is going to be kind of a long-range recon ship, so a large stealthy ship. And I'm not really going to worry about the interior at the moment. I may not worry about it at all. It depends on how we decide to destroy the ship. If it blows up in such a way that we never see the interior, then we really don't have to put any effort towards that. We just need to make the outside look good. But if it's going to blow up to where there's big holes inside of it and we can see inside of it, we need to take some effort or put some effort towards making the interior look at least somewhat realistic. Also, I'm not going to worry about making the ship entirely functional in terms of a ship that a player could control. I'll just have basically thrusters in one direction and no thrusters in all the other directions, because that tends to make ships look uglier, at least in most cases. But let's go ahead and start on that. I think I'll be doing a time lapse for this, though I don't expect it to take too long. So this may be a rather short episode, but it'll at least be a starting point. Next episode will quite possibly be working on the super weapon a little bit more, and then we might come back to working on this scenario a little bit more the episode after that. the ship, or the rough draft of the ship, is finished. I am hoping to have at least 4 escape pods. Ideally, I would have 4 for each side, but if I can fit 4 total, that would work. I'm not quite sure how big the escape pods are going to be yet, but it's quite possible we'll need a 3x3 block to make sure they get through. So 3x3 section of this with a little bit of space, and then another 3x3 section, which I think I could fit 3 here pretty easily. 4 would be a little bit difficult unless we start moving out forward a little bit. I made the ship wide enough that I can use gravity generators to push them out with enough force to ensure that they'll be able to break through the hull of the ship, using the design that we worked on previously when we were working on the escape pods. And as you can see, the hull doesn't really have all the bells and whistles that it needs at the moment, but they'll be added afterwards once we've decided more on the scenario. Again, next episode we'll probably be working on the super weapon and then come back to this in a future episode. But like if you like, subscribe if you're not, leave a comment if you have anything to say. I do read all the comments. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time!